Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the No Laying Up podcast. Solly here. Got yet another Ryder Cup episode for you. If you love the Ryder Cup, I'm excited to tell you this is not the last one we're doing. If you're ready for us to move on, I apologize. We got one more coming on this topic next week as well. Very different than what we've done. I think you'll like that one. I think you're going to like this one as well. We, in an attempt, you've heard all of our takes on all of this stuff. In an attempt to put a wrap on the 2025 Ryder Cup, I have a two-part episode for you. The first half is going to be with Duncan Carey. He is a golf course strategist. We get into some of his background. I won't give any of that away, but debriefing on the mistakes the U.S. made, what he has implemented in team events in the past, strategy-wise. I really enjoyed talking with Duncan. You're going to learn a lot from that one. I know I certainly did. Back half is going to be Jamie Kennedy. Jamie has a background with the European Tour, now works for Golf Digest. We get into his background as well, but has seen this process evolve on the European side, and we give him a chance to celebrate a little bit for Team Europe and his perspective on what happened on the grounds of Bethpage over this past weekend. I want to give a shout out to our friends at Rhoback. Fall golf is here, and you already know Rhoback is our go-to for polos, hoodies, like the one I got on right now. I love this one. We got our own NLU logo on the sleeve on this one. Hoodies, joggers, pants, all of it. Best fit, best feel. It's as simple as that. The Rhoback Delta pants are our favorite pants. I told them, send me every color. I'll throw out every other pant I have. I only wear Rhoback pants on the golf course now going forward. The stretch elastic waistband, game changer, gives you extra room for added comfort. It maintains that best fit possible. The fabric is smooth. It's wrinkle resistant, easy to pack into, if you're going on a long golf trip, throw in a bunch of Delta pants in there, you're going to be set. Comfortable to wear. The second one is a new one for us. We haven't talked much about the Rhoback Fulton vest. It is awesome. It's nice. It's light. It's got insulation to keep you warm. Isn't too bulky. It's got interior and exterior pockets. It's a really nice layering piece when you hit the course, despite the temperature dropping. Finally, just because it wouldn't feel right if we didn't mention the best hoodie in the game, the Rhoback Hezi hoodie. So dang soft. There's no better feeling than wearing a Rhoback hoodie fresh out of the package. As we head into fall, Rhoback.com, RHOBACK.com. Use code NLU at checkout for 20% off your first order through the end of this week. Pants, hoodies, vests, Rhoback has you covered. Rhoback.com, code NLU. Let's get to the pod. First up, Duncan Carey. All right, Duncan, thanks for joining. Really appreciate your time. First of all, before we get in the nuts and bolts of it, let's give the listeners a little bit of an idea of your background and where your expertise is coming from here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, good to join you. So I've worked in golf most of my life as a golf pro originally. And it's actually Ryder Cup, which started my life as a golf analyst, data person in golf. I was working at a golf club, and Darren Clark was our touring professional. So I got talking as he was about to become announced as the captain of the Ryder Cup team in 2016. This was around 2014. And I've always been into stats data, looking at the numbers, always been my thing. So I said to him, look, I think that data and stats is probably something that could really help you in the Ryder Cup. Piqued his interest. He got the job. I got a phone call. I was interested in what you talked about. Can we have a meeting? One of my good friends worked in soccer, football, doing this kind of thing. And we got our heads together, went and saw Darren, told him we think we can help you with course management stuff, pairings, wildcards, all that kind of thing. And the first job we got before we'd even set anything up was, right, you're doing the 2016 Ryder Cup. So we walked out of the meeting and we said, we better start a business. So that's where 15th Club, as you probably remember, that's where that started. So we did that. I'll go back to that bit in a minute, how we helped Darren. But then from there, we started helping with the Ryder Cup, did 2016 Ryder Cup. As we did that and worked with the European Tour, improving their systems so we could do that job, we started picking up some players, working with some players, helping them with course strategy, stats, data. And from there, now I work since 2020 on my own, helping players, help the International Presidents Cup teams and 3 Ryder Cups and Solheim Cups. Everything from setting season goals to how do I beat this golf course? How did I play the golf course? How am I playing this season? Scheduling, all that kind of thing. So everything sort of performance related, course strategy, all that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a very quick overview.
That's all I needed to say. Very confidently, very well qualified for this conversation is what I want to get at. Now, part of what I was thinking about here is we don't talk about, we talk about course fits every single week when it's a stroke play tournament. But if you're talking stroke play, you have to have a whatever 95th plus percentile performance that week to be in contention to win that week anyways. Whereas on a team event, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it seems like the stats, the strategy, all of that can play a bigger factor when it becomes 1v1, 2v2 in individual matches, and 12v12 overall in terms of tilting the advantage in your favor by making the right decisions. Am I on the right path with kind of analyzing why we obsess maybe over course setup and strategy over this event more so than we do an individual stroke play?
Yeah, I think so. Like stroke play, it's you turn up at the golf course, a couple of days, look at the golf course. How do I beat the course this week? How do I play? You can play really well and come 10th, or you can play really well and come first, or you can play really well and come 30th. It's a little bit more random, and it's you lose most weeks, right? This tournament and President's Cup, Solheim Cup the same, but particularly Ryder Cup it's around how do we do all the different things we can do to give ourselves a better chance of winning. I'm an analytics person, but I'm certainly not one of these that's like you must use the data completely. I think the best way it's used is the captain should run the show, but the analytics should certainly help him to qualify his decisions or challenge his decisions. It shouldn't be, if you go the other way and it's all data led, the captain's role is kind of irrelevant in a way, other than the motivational stuff and the videos and all that stuff you see. So I think, for a Ryder Cup particularly, I think there's three real things where data analytics really can help. Is if you're the home team, the course setup, which we'll probably talk about, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, we will.
Or if you're the away team, how do we play the golf course and how are they going to set it up? Your picks and then your pairings. So those are the three key things, really. But going back to your question, it's all those little things you can do in a head-to-head match which will give you the chance to then be successful. The players have still got to play well. Like everyone talks about data analytics. The players have still got to do their jobs and they've still got to do their thing. But if you can give them the confidence and you've done everything you can to make sure that they've got the best chance of winning their match, then that's what the analytics is for. Quickly, we'll probably reference this, but Luke Donald mentioned about shampoos and cracks indoors, and people are laughing and going, "Oh, that." But if you're a player, if you think, "Oh, he's doing that," then he definitely knows if I should be dealing with the odds and the evens.
Yeah,
he definitely knows that if he's done that. So it's those little things that all build up. But I think match play, it's around how can we get an edge over the opposition, which I think week to week, you're not thinking like that. You're not thinking, how do I beat Scotty Scheffler this week? How do I beat Rory this week? You're thinking, How do I play well? And how do I beat this golf course?
Because I think you can... I've been saying this, and I'd be curious to test it up against your knowledge here. I'd say, all right, the course setup, I believe, these are my words. You can use your words if you want. I think it was a complete disaster this week. But it doesn't fully explain Europe dominating and putting to the level that they did through 2 days, right? I think they made a mistake in giving them the stage to take that opportunity. But if you rolled the balls out, same setup, and played again this week, do I think Europe would beat the U.S. by that much on the greens? I do not think they would. Again, I think there's factors that contributed to that, which are mistakes that Europe would never make. I overheard assistant captains on the microphone saying, we got to speed these greens up. And I wanted to pull my hair out to say, guys, you're in charge of this. And I know there is a transition period where you hand the course over to
a very short period. And the person who then takes it off you should be fully aware of what you want to happen.
Right. It should never have gotten to the point that it got to. So let's work backwards here. And I'm asking you to paint this with a bit of a broad brush because I know what I'm asking involves a lot of intricate levels of data. And it's to say, all right, if you're going to because setting up the course and making and filling out your team and coming up with your pairings are all connected, right? It's if you're taking a certain guy, and I want to talk to you about Morikawa as well. If you're taking a certain guy, you need to have a reason for taking him and put him on a stage where his skills can best be used to your advantage. I think I'm not good enough at this to be able to explain why it worked out this poorly, but take me to setting up Bethpage Black as well as filling out your team and how you think the U.S. should have done this differently.
Yeah. So I'll start at how I think you need to reverse engineer it a little bit.
Okay.
So obviously, if you straight away think, right, how are we going to set the course up, you're probably not doing your job properly. The first thing you need to do is 18 months ago, have a system in place. This is what we did for Paris and Whistling Straits, is who is likely to make our team. So you need to start projecting and run projections of what is the most likely makeup of our 12 players. Because then once you know that will then determine, right then, how do we need to set this golf course up? And also who's likely to make the opposition team. So we did this for Paris. We started 18 months out. And we did it for Hazeltine, in fact, because we wanted to know. And our algorithms and systems and programs were pretty good. Like, we knew fairly long range out from the tournament who's likely to make the team. I mean, you don't need systems in place to work out who your top 5, 6, 7 are going to be. You know that.
Sure.
But you need to know, for me, you need to know that information before you then start the golf course up. Or you can do it the other way where, right, this is a golf course we got and we're going to set it up this way. Who do we then want to make the team? So you need to do one of those two things. And it feels like this week, neither of those things happened. So it was like, this is the golf course we've got. Oh, these are the guys we've got. Oh, hang on a minute, that doesn't quite work. So that's for me is the glaring error. Is like you shouldn't ever be in a position whereby the golf course setup and the who haven't been put together. So so going back to it, who's going to make the team? Once you know that, you can start setting your golf course up. And there's two ways you do it. You can set the golf course up to enhance your team and hinder the opposition if the data allows that. I think the data at Bethpage, more than ever, probably didn't allow that as much as happened in the past. Like in Paris,
compare that to Hazeltine, right? Because that was a way different makeup of the two teams, and there was a somewhat similar setup, but the US was able to exacerbate the distance advantage they had then.
Yeah. So Hazeltine, I got there on the Saturday before, and the greenkeepers were cutting out the lower limbs, shaving the rough down. I think Phil might have even been there from memory, orchestrating this whole get the limbs out of the trees, get the rough off. We want to be able to hit it anywhere and fire at the pins in the middle because we're good at that, and they're not. And it worked. It worked. And then Paris, it was, I think I mentioned this before. Paris was, let's win the hole with the tee shot, not the putt. So
which made for horrible golf viewing, if I may say. Great strategy. I was so 100%. Mad at you guys for that.
But then this actually leads into Bethpage. Did they want a birdie fest that everyone was entertained, or did the Americans want to win the Ryder Cup? That's kind of a different argument. Like, that's a different argument, and that's beyond my you're getting into different worlds there. But I think
that is the only explanation I can come up with for why it ended up the way it did. Was they wanted birdies, wanted crowd, and that was the strategy.
Yeah. But then part of this is if you're going to pick Bethpage as a venue, what would have happened if Keegan had turned up to Bethpage having picked 6 wildcards who completely fit Bethpage as a difficult driving hole where if you're in the rough and the pins at the front, you're dead. You have to hit fairways. You've got to be a bomber and you need to be a good ball striker. And then he turns up to that. Like, what would have happened then? Like, it's which is kind of a little bit what's happened. But going back to the point of so Paris, we thought, right, we're good off the tee. We're an accurate team off the tee. We've got some good tee players there. We had people like Alex Noren and Sergio, Henrik Stenson, Rory, people at that time who were hitting fairways and were good. We, not as good a iron players as the American team and probably not as good on the greens. We then decided we need to almost decide some of these holes, particularly in foursomes, off the tee. Because if you're good off the tee there, you're in the hole. If you're wayward off the tee, you're making bogey and you're not winning any holes. So little things like knowing our driving distances of our team, tightening the fairways, moving the fairways in and out. The rough wasn't 5 yards and then spectators. It was 25 yards, ropes, spectators, because we didn't want the rough trampled down to give the Americans an advantage if they were wayward off the tee.
Can I pause on this for just 1 second? Because I think we've talked a lot about this on this podcast about, all right, well, if your narrow fairways and thick rough can lead to bomber's paradise in general, why was that not the case at Le Golf National? Like, is there a length of hole where it makes sense that it puts an emphasis on hitting the fairway versus, hey, everybody's going to be in the rough anyways, let's hit it down there as far as possible? Like, why didn't that strategy work at Le Golf?
Yeah, because when you put Bubba Watson and Phil Mickelson in your foursomes pairings...
What was the reaction to that when that happened?
Honestly, when we saw that they were playing foursomes, I didn't outwardly say this, but me and the guys, we've won this. And that sounds not arrogant, but it was
No,
like, they
makes sense.
haven't, it made you think they don't have a plan. They don't know
Right.
what they're, not what they're doing, but they don't know how to play this golf course. They don't understand what you've got to do here. Like, and it just it gives you and the team confidence. Like, when you see that, the confidence that runs through the team is like, they don't know what they're doing. They haven't worked this out. And that's an extra margin as well when you see that the other team haven't done exactly the right things. So so we did that, and I think at Bethpage, so you need to know what players you've got. You then set the golf course up accordingly to maximise your chances. In Keegan's defence, I think the teams were fairly evenly matched this time. However, I'm not sure cutting the rough down and neutralising people like Scotty, Colin, JJ, Xander, Ross Henley, Cantley, who are all ranked in the top 10 approach play the last 50 rounds, last year and a half, versus probably 2 or 3 Europeans. And then you've got 5 or 6 of your team are better off the tee than probably only Rory and John Rahm are probably better off the tee regularly than 6 or 7 of the American team. So you're taking that skill is becoming neutralized and you're putting all your eggs into a putting basket, which could work. And if it had
they could have out-putted Europe. Yeah, they could have. Yeah.
He's made it a putting contest and we've out-putted them. But Europe generally putt better at Ryder Cups. Like Justin Rose, something happens to him no one can explain. But it's leaving too much to chance. Like you're leaving too much to, right, we're just going to putt better. Especially when you've got such good iron players in your team. What's the phrase? You're almost to try and strengthen your weakness. You're weakening your strengths, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the scoring this week, I've looked at this today and yesterday, and I was looking at it, it's changed my opinion. We're going off track a little bit here, but I think Ryder Cups, you need your top 4 or 5 players to perform, and the other players kind of just need to chip in a little bit. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah.
That's how it feels to me. Like Europe, Tommy Fleetwood, Rory, Tyrrell Hatton, John Rahm, top 4 point scorers. Job done. Sepp Straka, Bob, Rasmus, try and pick up a little point, half point here and there. But it's really around, you should set that golf course up to maximise your best players and let them perform what they're good at.
Yeah.
Because Scott they should build the whole week around, make sure he performs well. Not just with the course, but with pairings and everything. And it goes to something I've written it down, he's never won a foursomes match in 3 Ryder Cups. He's won 1 4-ball match, and he's never lost at singles. So this comes into the whole pairings discussion.
Which pairings is a tricky thing, right? But it especially with four. So there's golf ball considerations, but especially this week where I didn't even know this was a thing. When you have ball in hand, you can change out the ball you want in the fairway as well, and you can put whatever ball in play you want off the tee anyway. So putting that aside, obviously, and there's personality considerations, I think, with it as well. But I'm not of the belief that you can just print off a computer printout to say, here's your foursomes pairings.
No.
There's a strategy for how that filters down into 4-ball, how many matches everybody's going to play, all that stuff. But you also, like, I was pro taking Collin Morikawa for this team because I looked, if you look at his components of his play, he is far down the list in strokes gained overall, and his skill profile has decreased from his peak, and it's almost entirely from putting.
Yeah.
So that to say, like, hey, if you take Collin Morikawa on your team, he sounds like he'd be a really good foursomes player.
At Bethpage, black.
If you set up the course a lot more difficult and hand him somebody that can tee off the odds and get that ball out there and in the fairway, and kind of looking around the team, you're like, okay, Scotty's good driver of the ball, obviously. Cameron Young, really good driver and long hitter. And you start getting down there, like, all right, well, Xander, sure, as well. But then you didn't really have a fourth guy that's like your boomer, right? So it all didn't work, right? It all didn't add up into, they neutralized Henley and explain how you would consider that they neutralized the skills of Henley and Morikawa as well.
Yeah. So Morikawa is your advantage with Morikawa, and probably JJ Spawn as well, and probably a few other, but your advantage of them is hitting good approach shots that are hard, right?
Yes.
So finding a pin that is tucked behind a bunker on a fast green, or a back right pin that's sloping away, and if you miss it, you're short-sided and you can't get up and down. That's where those players are an advantage, where they're playing off a fairway, but it's to a tough pin or a semi-rough. They're playing they're playing to a difficult pin that the opposition are going to struggle to get to because they're not as good ball strikers.
And there's consequences for missing it is a huge factor. Yeah.
When you think of Ryder Cups, you think of people chipping in and great. I can't remember any short game this week. I can't really remember any kind of short game action going on because people could
Brahms
just
chip in on 8 is what is going to come to mind. But yes,
over the week, it wasn't like a big factor of being good at short game. It was kind of like people just firing at pins because they knew they could. So Morikawa gets neutralized because what he can do, the lesser ball strikers can do as well. Because you can just, the famous clip of Rory when he turned around to the crowd and said what he said. Jamie highlighted this on his tweet. This is a great example of from there, normally to a front left pin, he should not have been able to get that ball anywhere near the flag or probably hold the green. And he's hit it 5 feet. Whereas if you had Morikawa there on the normal golf course, he would have fared better than most of the rest of the field or the two team. So that's where you're neutralising it. And Henley, Henley's a good ball striker as well, right? He's really high up the approach extreme ranking, good, and a putter. But, the odds even things with him and Scotty kind of encapsulates the problem of... I know for a fact, because I've done several of them, the European team would have known that months ago, who they're playing with and what
Duncan, anybody that can log on online knew that. Like it was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, but even if it wasn't, right, even if it were, let's pretend it's not an obvious thing which everyone knew. It's how you communicate to the players and how this is where it comes back to culture and trust and everything. How you got to a player, any pairing, and go, you two are one of our best foursomes pairings. You're going out Friday morning. We have full faith in you getting a point. But the best possibility of you two winning a point is for you to tee off odds and you to tee off evens because of this. If they haven't gone through the process of, right, if Scotty tees off the first hole, then Russell hits the second shot, then if they haven't gone through that process for 18 holes and they've had 2 years to do it, then that's like you're just gifting a point, or you're gifting shots per hole to the opposition.
You're gifting a percent advantage that may or may not affect the outcome of the match, but there's no point in gifting that percentage advantage.
Gifting little percentages,
100%
in the Ryder Cup.
Exactly.
That's the point.
And to your point there, I know of a story of 2 players on the U.S. side in a President's Cup that were explaining this. You are odds, you are evens on this hole, and the 2 players said, we want to do the other way. And it's like, all right, well now you have it.
That's all right if they can tell you why.
But it also signifies, I think, a distrust in the information in the process, right? There's Dodo Molinari comes up and says, like, clearly, like, hey, you guys should go off these holes. Like, do you think Rory and Tommy are going to be like, nah, I don't trust you. We're going to flip it.
Exactly. But I think that comes back to a even more of a deeper cultural, not cultural, but like philosophical culture of the team of like, we trust you, that we know that that's the right thing to do because we completely trust what you've done because we know you've spent 2 years of your life doing this. So yes, we agree with that.
People that get on us for talking too much about the Ryder Cup, I'm like, dude, I can't do this about any golf event, right? There's so much strategy.
Going back to like one thing that I really picked up on, I went back today and I looked at Keegan's press conference on Saturday night and I wrote it down or printed it off. He said, and this sentence, like, it made me look at the screen when I was. He said, "I think historically we play faster greens on the PGA Tour than they do," and I just thought, "Is this where we're at? That you're as a group, you're still of the impression that you are playing them from a different tour, and that kind of, and it's a little thing, but it's kind of, wow, it gives an insight into the thought."
The data would probably almost certainly say, and has always supported, that the American players do putt better on faster greens than the Europeans do. That doesn't mean that they don't play the fast greens. They just US putts better on them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he says, obviously, when we go to the British Open, their greens are slower. So, and it's not really about the fact he's not wrong. It's that kind of, are they still of the impression that we're the bombers, we need short rough and we can hit it anywhere, and they are shorter hitters and they need soft greens. It's all that kind of, you just wonder if that's kind of still, they're going through conventional wisdom of 10 years ago at Hazeltine, still with that kind of them and us, how we play golf.
I don't know if this is inherent in just American culture, but there's certain tropes in at least two of our sports, and I'll use baseball as an example as well, of just like people that grew up believing this, even if it can be clearly proven that the opposite is true now, have it ingrained in their head because they still have a so-and-so 50-year-old guy saying like, yeah, putting is the most important thing in the game, even though we can definitively say it's not. Like I was on, I'll tell you, like I was discussing, I thought talked for 30 minutes over the span of 2 days with Ken Griffey Jr., who's a baseball player, and about baseball stuff. And like, it was, I realized I'm arguing with Ken. I'm like trying to prove I'm right with Ken Griffey Jr., but he was like, oh, the guys threw just as hard in my day as they do now. And like, I'm like, oh my God, dude, the statistics are so far from supporting that. It's like, yeah, they changed the way they measure miles per hour. And I was like, no, I can't tell you you're wrong here, but you're wrong. That's the right thinking. That's just wrong. But I'm an idiot arguing with Ken Griffey Jr. And but so this, I keep pulling the thread on this to say like, all right, man, this was not an expectation of Keegan Bradley. Like you should not, if he was fully further invested into the Ryder Cup captaincy role, he could have gotten to this level. Yes, but like he was cruising along with his playing career, and this got thrust on him in a sudden way. So I feel like I'm really hard on him, but like it speaks. Can you speak to the higher level of European culture that would have never let this Keegan Bradley thing happen?
Yeah, it's a full-time job. It's a full-time job that you have to almost sacrifice your golf career to do this job, because it's. And I think there's a distinct difference in the way that Europe and the US are doing things at the moment. Not always at the moment. I think the European culture at the moment it's almost like, and I think I mentioned this to you over the weekend, I feel like, and this is no disrespect to Luke, because he's the reason why this theory of mine is where it is. I almost feel like the who as a captain on either team is kind of irrelevant at the moment, but for two very different reasons. I think whoever's the captain of the European team can walk into that job and they have everything they need in place around them to be successful, because they know who the vice captains would be, because it's a process. Like Justin Rose might step in next time, and Thomas Bjorn may step. I don't know, but there's always continuity. They're not going to go right. You four out the door. Who am I for? What I want to bring in? That won't be allowed to happen. So whoever is the Ryder Cup captain for Europe, it's not irrelevant, but they're going to walk into a system whereby it's not reliant on the captain. It's reliant on the infrastructure in place for him to do his job. It feels like the captain of the American team is kind of a little bit irrelevant, because whoever walks in is got the complete opposite of that, where it's like, there you go. Over to you. Start.
What do you want to do? Yeah.
What do you want to do? Who's your vice captains? Okay, no problem. Who do you want to do stats? I'm not doing that. Who's just and that kind of me feels like it's the same thing but totally different. And I think the Europeans have got themselves into and this is what I was thinking this over the weekend. And you always see that the European social media team are so good. They're so good. That's not by coincidence. That's because they want the best people to do the best job, to make the players feel great and to tell the story. So it's everything around the whole backroom team is geared towards everyone being successful. I do think there's some cultural things that help European, and that's difficult to overcome. I just think there is stuff like that. But having been in the team room 3 times, it is genuinely egos don't come in the door. Everyone wants the same thing. I was on a WhatsApp group in 2016 when Darren Clark did it, and he asked the players amazingly, like he asked them individually, then he shared it with us. Actually, that's incorrect. Who would you do and don't want to play with? Which I'm not sure is a great exercise personally. Some captains do it, some don't. I'm not sure there's great value in it, because if the data then suggests you've got to play with someone, or that it's overwhelmingly obvious you should play with someone that you said you didn't want to, it becomes an issue. But anyway, Henrik Stenson and Sergio Garcia, the first two to reply. Henrik Stenson, I'm not marrying them. I'm playing golf with them. I don't care who I play with. Sergio Garcia, I will play with anyone. Rory, I will play with anyone. And it's just, it's like, it's not a question.
Right.
But I think that for me is the place at the moment. Is the European system and structure is so good that anyone can walk in the door as a captain and probably do a very good job because it's all in place. And I think the American system is whoever walks in through the captaincy door has got a lot to sort out. And it kind of feels like, I mean, over in the UK, we have golf clubs have a different captain every couple of years, and they come in and dig up a bunker, stick a tree in, and change the course. And the next one comes in, he wants to do something different. It kind of feels like the Americans are a bit like that at the moment. It's a bit like everyone, the Keegan thing. Like so vice captains for me, I think they need to buy into the process as well, which is what Europe have got right. Everyone's on the same page.
Which, to interrupt you, this was the whole point of the task force, was to do this, what you're like, have the continuity in place and have the role be replaceable and roll through. And like, I feel like they overreacted to 2023 and threw that game plan out the window. I mean, I know that one was a disaster, but like they started over from scratch really with the Keegan thing. And there is a bit really on both sides. There does seem to be a lack of obvious captain to step up. But I also, people associate a big name with a great captain as well, right? Like Steve Stricker goes in the history books as a great captain. He was great President's Cup captain, great US captain. And he was the least demonstrative of any of them, right? He would have been the quietest leader, but he went about, I don't know the details of what he did well, but he obviously did something well and put that team in a position.
He should have then taken the team to Rome, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the difference. He's like, right, we've done well here, but now, right, let's plan for Rome. How do we go and win an away Ryder Cup?
Yep.
Rather than going, right, he's done, one and done, not vice captain anymore, out the door, see you later. Whereas Thomas Bjorn, Ryder Cup winning captain, Paul McGinley, Ryder Cup winning captain, both involved in the system of what's going on, but not overbearing at the front and centre. They're doing their jobs and helping Luke be successful.
Well, that's where we're seeing the benefit. You know, again, you can roll your eyes at this if you want to, but like the benefits of it all goes back to Seve. You pull the string, it really does end up back at Seve. But like the 90s and 2000s dominance of Team Europe has spawned all of these captains. They lost like 4 or 5 potential captains to live, and they still keep the system in place like that. And then it's like, all right, Jim Furyk is heavily involved on the U.S. side. He's been a part of how many losing teams on his own, and how many, that he played on, a captain to losing team, and has now been assistant captain on multiple losing teams. That's not to say it's his fault, but like they don't have that guy to lean on to say like, hey, here's the system that has worked, So
with vice captains, I've got a couple. I have like 2 different opinions. I've seen it whereby someone spent 2 years of their life working on a captaincy, and then vice captains come in who are strong characters. When you've got 4 strong characters coming and a captain, they can influence a captain deviating from the plan because he doesn't want to upset his peers, doesn't want to. He's like, well, okay, right, and it becomes too many voices in the room when a captain. I've seen that happen, but I've also seen it where you've got captains who are strong enough to ask the right questions. Luke Donald was a vice captain in 2018 in our captain's WhatsApp group. He was probably the quietest in the group, but the most thoughtful, and asked of us as stats guys the most challenging questions. So
what's an example of a challenging question? Like what do you mean by that?
Just like about he would like on a day when there's not been like loads of chat, like almost like I've been looking at the putting stats and what's the grain going to be like in Paris, and how are we going to factor in who's good at putting up grain and down, little things like that. And you think he's thinking about this, he's on this. Like, but it just made you at the time when I think I was out shopping with the wife, and you just go, oh wow, okay, right. And it challenges you, and that's what you want as a stats. But going back to like the analytics of stats, I think you need to be able to have a voice and challenge and be challenged. And I think that's how it has to work. If you're not being listened to, the worst thing that can happen, which is a little bit that might be happening this time, and I don't know the answer to this, is you don't have a voice in the room, you're not listened to, but you get the blame. Or you are being listened to and you probably should get the blame. That's the opposite, isn't it?
Last one. You worked with the President's Cup team, International President's Cup team in 2024 in Montreal. Can you just walk us through the exercise of, all right, here is our team. What does that look like on paper against the U.S. team? And how can we set up the golf course to tilt ultimately the U.S. obviously ended up winning that one, but how did you go about trying to tilt the advantage in your favor any way you could?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we had a site visit a year out from Montreal with me and the other stats guys, Mike Weir, the course people, and we spent 2 days. We played the course on the first day just to get a feel of the course, and then we walked pretty much the second day with whole maps, everything. Dylan, the other guy that does the President's Cup with me, he'd done a lot of work on sort of the golf course side of things, and we'd come to the idea that, and we'd found some analytics that the international team, were better out of the rough at certain distances than the American team was. So rather than just cutting the rough all at certain distance, I think it was off the top of my head like 1 to 125, 130 out. We were fairly decent from that length of a bit longer rough. So the rough wasn't exactly the same length all the way up the hole. So it got a bit longer as you got nearer the hole. It made it a bit tougher. We looked at runoff areas. And what we tried to do with the President's Cup, it's a little bit of a different animal because there is a difference in the teams, right? So you've got to try and it's. I would argue that winning an away President's Cup is probably the hardest thing in golf. Anyway, but I think we tried to, because we were underdogs. Our theory was if you make things as random as possible and as different as possible and as uncomfortable as possible, then you start to level the playing field a little bit. So we were talking about bunkers and the ground scarf. What do you kind of we want it as coarse as possible, as different as possible. Do they normally get raked differently? Chains of some holes run off, some holes rough, so it's just different, and it makes them think more. Try and take a wedge out of the hand to make some of the par fours drivable, a bit shorter. We knew that they were better on a certain level of approach shots. So the 17th at Montreal, there was a tee box that, I don't know if I'm giving away the secrets here, but anyway, the tee box that was a certain distance that would be perfect for the Americans. So we were saying to Mike, make sure that there's a camera there or a thing so that the people that set the course up who are neutral cannot put a tee there. Just grow that rough. Do not allow a tee to be there. And for par fives, there was a certain second shot distance that we were much better than the Americans at. So we were same sort of thing. Like that tee box there, that can't be allowed to be used. We need to make sure all the second shots are coming from between 190 and 210. We have to have that happen. So that's how you kind of set a golf course up. It's just helping you get an advantage because you need to do it. And I think with the President's Cup as well, there's a totally different dynamic with that in terms of the pairing strategy. Is just a whole new world of mind games and things like that with the head-to-head pairings. That's a lot of time goes into that.
Yeah, gosh, that'd be fun. I would say we might have to have you back on around that, but you're not going to give away anything around that right now. So. Duncan, well, I really appreciate your time. We're definitely going to be using you as a resource in these things in the future as well, because it's been really, really informative. And thanks for sharing it with the world. And best of luck to you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Duncan, and thanks to our friends at The Stack. You can learn more about The Stack System at thestacksystem.com/NLU. Code no laying up will get you 10% off your offerings. It is a fantastic tool if you want to add speed to your golf game. It is. I know we've talked about this a lot, but it's hard to express how fun it is. One, I greatly look forward to doing my workouts. It has made me more limber. It's actually helped my back a little bit. A lot of haters in the building have been telling me that it was going to hurt my back worse. It's actually helped things because I stretch on a more consistent basis. It tells you when you should be working out. It tells you what weights to swing. It tells you how often to swing them. It monitors your progress. It gives you real data straight to your face to say, here's how you're improving, and it's undeniable. I need to be more diligent about doing my stack putting and my stack wedges. That's a goal of mine for the fall. I've seen the benefits of the system, Dr. Sasha McKenzie, of what he has put into this app. I've gotten so much out of the speed stuff. I need to take it upon myself to apply that as well to my wedges and putting, because they're both, the little bit that I have done has made it very clear that I would improve if I dedicated the same amount of time to this. So check it out. Stacksystem.com/NLU. Code no laying up will get you 10% off a bundle. It's great for the winter. You should make this a goal for the winter. You just got to do this workout. It's really like 30 minutes a day, twice a week. If you can't find an hour to get a little bit better at golf, you don't really want to get better at golf. I'm sorry. Stacksystem.com/NLU. Code no laying up. Here's Jamie Kennedy. All right. He refused to come on after the 2016 Ryder Cup. He refused to come on after the 2021 Ryder Cup. But all of a sudden he was super. I'm making that up completely. Jamie Kennedy, you're here. You can gloat. You can do whatever you'd like. Congratulations to Team Europe. Very well played. Very well deserved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the platform. Thanks for the congratulations. I'm just looking forward to hearing the excuses. But yeah, basking in another win.
I'm proud of the lack of excuses I've given so far. I've done nothing but tip my cap here. I didn't come into this one braggadocious. This is the least regretful I've been after a humiliating American defeat in quite some time, which isn't really saying much, but still. But for those that aren't familiar as much with your background, can you give us the listeners an idea? You've been a guest on this podcast before, probably in a different capacity that you're in now, but give the listeners a bit of an idea on your background.
Sure, yeah. So I'm with Golf Digest now, head of content there, but my relationship to the Ryder Cup goes quite far back. So obviously growing up as a massive golf fan in Scotland, and then worked at the European Tour, which is DP World Tour, which owns half the Ryder Cup. So my role very quickly moved to helping deliver the Ryder Cup Europe content that you saw. I worked 2014, 2016, 2018, and then I jumped over. I actually didn't get to go to 21 COVID year. And then in 2023 in Rome, I could have been there with work, but I actually decided that while I was young, I wanted to see what everyone was talking about. So I went to Rome as a fan. I got tickets. I used all the connections, got in places I probably didn't deserve to be in. But I wanted to go, and like for years, I had told everyone how great this event was, but I was working behind the scenes and I didn't get to see shots. I didn't get to have a beer. I didn't get to. And so in 23 in Rome, I went as a fan, and the first, the Thursday, Friday there just blew me away to see what it was like to have to get on the 4 a.m. shuttle to get to the first tee and all this. So I feel like now coming back to Bethpage and getting to work at the event and see behind the scenes, I feel like I've got like these 3 or 4 different lenses into what the Ryder Cup is and what makes it great. And another pretty special week.
Well, that's what I want. You mentioned you didn't make it to 2021, but actually that's what I brought you in to talk about. I'd like to break down Whistling Straits a little bit longer, kind of
yeah, 4-year anniversary. Let's go.
Well, you know a lot of what goes into the European process and the European culture, right? Can you give us an idea? And again, we're probably not done with postmortems, but I've been hard on Keegan, but I almost this past week or so I've been like, he shouldn't have been put in that spot. And then it goes up the ladder to say, all right, well, who's making these decisions? What's going wrong on the American side? Ignoring that for a second to say, what's going right on the European side? What is the infrastructure that's in place? We refer to this system. We refer to this culture that exists on Team Europe. I talked about it a little bit on Sunday, but you'd be better off explaining what the infrastructure and setup looks like that puts these guys in a position to succeed from the DP World Tour perspective.
Yeah, it's probably not the most exciting part of the Ryder Cup to talk about the connection, but I think to your point, it is so valid that the infrastructure that leads Team Europe is the infrastructure that leads the DP World Tour. So that's everything from our role on the content side to the media side to the physios to the doctors to everyone's. We have these meetings and catch-ups and meet and greets with players throughout the whole year. We're not in the PGA of America's position where we're trying to all of a sudden last minute ask for access or this is how we might do things. A lot of the stuff that you see at the Ryder Cup from the European side is tested at a European Tour event or at the Sevi Cup or the Team Cup that it's now called. Captaincy, meetings, dinners, socials, team room atmosphere, the doctors, the analytics, whatever it is it's not just the week of. It's very much the end of like a 2-year process. And I still remember, so 2018 was the Ryder Cup I probably worked on the most behind the scenes. And Luke Donald was brought in there as a sort of assistant to come in. And I met Luke then, and I remember how seriously he took it then. And you could tell that as the Americans had for a while, and they've gone away from it, there was this, you pay your rights to help the team here, and then you're an assistant there, and then potentially you're in that pool that might be captains. And it's funny now to look back and think how he wasn't meant to be captain 3 years ago, and then all of a sudden turns into what Keegan says is the greatest Ryder Cup captain ever. So, but yeah, it's a huge machine, and genuinely, everyone talks about the secret sauce of Team Europe. That is certainly a huge aspect of it. There's all these different ways you can look at it, but the comfortability that these players have in the team room with the people that they're traveling with, the people that are telling them to do things, plays a huge role. And it means that, Luke talked about it a lot. I just want my players to play the best when they get there. And you can debate how that's possible. But as anybody knows that plays golf, you just want to be comfortable. So all these little things that they do to help the players feel comfortable, it's hard to put in strokes gained or wins and losses, but I think it's a factor. So
it's 100%. I mean, there's a reason why I think Rory shows up from the first tee Friday morning just ready to perform, and Tommy Fleetwood, as great of a player he is, turns into an even better version of himself in these scenarios. And you've given a bunch of examples. You're a great follow on social media, on the Everything app, one of the few last good follows there is out there on that app. I can't dedicate time to it anymore, man. I respect how you're able to do it, but you gave a bunch of just examples of small details this week that Team Europe got right. But I want to go back to 2018, if we can. And I don't remember if this story originates from you or if Tommy was the one that told this on the podcast, but Tommy's getting ready to play his first Ryder Cup. And when he goes that week of, and, you know, is hitting the first tee shot on the first hole, that's not the first time he's been there. I'm not talking about playing the French Open. Set the scene for that example. I think you're nodding as in you know what I'm talking about, of example of Team Europe willing to go the extra level.
Again, we're in the team with them. We're trying to think of ideas of what we can do to tell the story. And we'd found this photo of Tommy and Finno at Glen Eagles. They'd taken a selfie on the first tee as fans. And we thought, it's a nice thing. 4 years later, they're now in the Ryder Cup together. Let's go and take the selfie. But beyond that, let's film them. So we went in at 6 a.m. on the Wednesday, or the Thursday maybe even, so the day before the first day of the Ryder Cup. And we said to them, you go into the grandstand, it's completely empty. We're going to video you from afar, but we're going to pick up your conversation. Just go and soak up the moment, take the selfie. That was all we were asking. It was a nice little piece, and it was fine. Then I'm waiting at the stairs. Finno comes out. And I said, where's Tommy? And he said, he's got a meeting. And I said, he's got a meeting on the first tee. It was like, it's 6 a.m. There's nobody here. And he said, yeah, he's meeting his mental coach. And I went around and looked up, and they were at the very top of the grandstand. And when they came back down, they were going to do their team photos and I think a couple more press conferences and things. But I caught the mental coach, and he wasn't going to tell me everything that they were talking about. But he said he wanted Tommy, and Tommy wanted to go through the emotions he was going to feel walking onto this first tee, which was the biggest ever. He knew he was going to be in one of the early pairings, and he knew that the emotions would be high. He hadn't played a Ryder Cup before. They talked about his fears. They talked about the emotions. They talked about what he might be able to do to focus on. And then, yeah, I mean, hindsight is 2020, but he goes out and wins his first 4 matches with Francesco and builds a legacy that now makes him statistically the greatest Ryder Cup player. But that was happening the day before his very first Ryder Cup shot. And I was struck. I still think about it to this day, especially when you see the first tee, even at Bethpage, and just the mayhem that goes on, to how you could channel everything to then hit a good golf shot and then have a good week. And that was just kind of a small example of what he felt was important the night before.
Well, as much as we are going to, praise a deserved Team Europe here, it's not like they win this every time. And you were, involved in the European tour between 2016 and 2018. They got beat pretty handily. I'm willing to throw 2021 out in this. The COVID year was just a weird year, and that was obviously Europe was up against a tall task there. But something happened, it seems like, after 2016 that set Europe on an even better path. I'm wondering if you can speak to any of that, whether it's more connectivity in the statistical side of it, or, what did Thomas Bjorn learn from Darren Clarke's captaincy to make sure that Europe was going to improve from there?
Yeah, it's funny when you see the captains. Team Europe is such a strong bond and everything you hear, but there is this funny aspect where every captain that comes in wants their legacy to be different. And it's funny, you come in and you think, but we've just done really well. Like, that worked really well. But they come in and they just don't want to be given somebody else's playbook and say, oh, just run their plays because that worked. They're alphas, all these guys have main character vibes and they want to sort of impose their own thing. The one thing I'll say to that era of the Ryder Cup was kind of the embracing of Eduardo Molinari. So, that just coincided with that exact time. The course setup stuff at Le Golf National, which I know you've talked about before, and we've done videos on before, but the level of detail there with position of grandstands, corners of fairways, green speeds, pin, not pin locations, but to give you an example, going into 2018, I was talking to this at dinner with some of the guys the other day. they have a captain's app that has all the data that you could imagine. You know, it has a really cool trigger that is when a player gets within one shot of a lead, how do they perform on the next 3 or 4 holes? So it's hard to replicate Ryder Cup pressure, but their metric was, we want to see when a guy sees himself on the leaderboard, do they just string out pars? Do they put the foot down? Do they crumble? Whatever it is. So that was called like a pressure monitor. So they were able to see that. But one of the other things was they had strokes gained approach broken down by distance and green shape. So I remember, and if you think of Le Golf National, it's got very distinct sort of pear-shaped greens that go different ways. So they're able to say, you know, from 175 to 200 with a green that goes from front left to back right, Martin Keimer is half a shot better than player X. And we're going to suit. So if we can fiddle the foursomes pairings, or even in 4-ball, tell him that, and if he positions himself there. And listen, I think everyone could appreciate you can get bogged down in that. But what I think that Dodo is very good at, and what Luke especially is very good at, is they take in all the information and they just deliver to the players what they kind of need to know. And they'll, you know, all these players are doing their own different things, but when it comes down to it, it's just giving them the confidence that if they're pulling driver on, I don't know, the 9th hole at Bethpage, that it's the right decision. And like that, you know, data suggests, yeah, it tick. Now go and do your thing. But yeah, I would certainly say that Dodo's influence can't be overlooked from exactly that era of 2018 onwards. So
compare that to, you know, Ted Scott identifying that Scotty and Russell Henley needed to switch.
I was going to ask: is Ted Scott the new Dodo on the American team? Is he going to start crunching some numbers and maybe fighting some people, you know, in a dare? Who knows?
It's funny. Dodo, in terms of like the European version of that, is a compliment. You would also use the term dodo to like denigrate somebody as well. Like that you would call them a dodo, and then it's somebody that's not so bright. So it's so funny how that you know, gets used now. But all right, I'm gonna propose a hypothetical situation to you here. I'm gonna put a big. You're wearing a Europe flag around your neck. You're dressed in blue and gold today. You are a European through and through. You got you wore he's got a big letter hat on that you were hiding from me. I'm
gonna take it off because I only ever bought this to just wear it, like put next to my laptop in the media center just to mark my colors. But yeah.
There's no cheering in the press room. Come on. You guys are bad betrayals of that.
Right.
But, anyways, you are offered $10 million to be the United States Ryder Cup captain, but you have to win the Ryder Cup in Ireland. Let's say you're incentivized to flip. All right. You're flipping over to the American side. How would you go about setting up the infrastructure you're talking about on Team Europe that's necessary to beat an opponent like Europe? And I'm phrasing that intentionally to say, like, you don't just need to win a golf event. You have to go up against a team that is willing to spend an incredible amount of time and effort, including the players, being so dedicated to this event. That's different than just facing a neutral team. I think that's important. How would you go about setting up that infrastructure?
It's a great question. It's a great question. $10 million is a lot of money to do it. But yeah, it's hard when you say, I've just talked about how the infrastructure of the machine of the DP World Tour is just a constant to the next cycle. Whereas, you know, the PGA Tour aren't, you know, invested in helping these guys necessarily. They get, obviously, their little payment, and a good Ryder Cup is good for the PGA Tour, don't get me wrong. But there's not that consistency that goes throughout it. And Keegan can have all these meetups that they want, and they can try things out at the President's Cup. But I genuinely think you need to sit down the core now and sort of try and get them to be the leaders. I have this feeling, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I'll put a question to you. Do you think Scotty would have given up the Claret Jug this year to win the Ryder Cup?
No.
Do you think Rory would have given up the green jacket to win an away Ryder Cup? No. Okay, so I think he might have, because he thinks he'll get another shot at the Masters. But I genuinely think
the Masters is different for Rory. I think you could say like, if he'd have won the PGA this year, would he give that up to win the Ryder Cup? I think you could convince me on that.
Yeah, and that's not to say, again, who knows how much that plays out and trying to hole a 10-foot putt on Sunday on the 13th hole of the Ryder Cup. But you do get the feeling that the Americans from the setup, from their childhood, from the way they grow up, from the way they get on the PGA Tour, are very insular. They're very, individual teams. Whereas this idea that the Europeans are just connected throughout the year, and not because of a bond, not because they're necessarily best mates, but because they're coinciding with this team that is, when I think of Team Europe, people mention Team Europe. I used to feel a part of it at one point, and I felt it was 60, 80 people deep. It wasn't, the 12 or the core 6 or whoever it was. So to me, it kind of starts with getting the players invested. And listen, me and you've had conversations in the past. You can give players way too much power and they suddenly go off into weird directions. And me and you had a conversation on the golf course last week about the doctors at the European side. And the doctors were saying, like, they do a lot of research to try and figure out the best ways for recovery, whatever it is. But they say they take a lot of ideas from the players. And he was open to it. He's like, some of the ideas the players come up with are ludicrous. But we take, like, that's not going to help anyone, but we take it on board and we tell them why or why not. Whereas on the American side, the players are so powerful. Like, player power over there is, if they wanted a certain captain, or you've seen it in the past, if they want a pick, the pick is going to go kind of to who the players want, and maybe the pairings that way. So I don't know. I kind of feel like a lot of it starts with the players. I haven't heard a lot of the American players say the things that you expect them to say. And I know Jordan a few years ago said we need to go over there and win one, and it didn't happen. But even in the press conference there, I know Keegan was falling on the sword a lot, and the guys were saying, we just got outplayed. But it didn't seem like there was quite the I don't know, the anger, the upset, the frustration, the what can we do? Like, this is on us to try and figure this out to get next time around that we can, win over there. So it's a long-winded way of saying it's a very difficult question to ask, but I do think, to your point, I do think it is more what you do away from Ryder Cups and away from the month around it that sort of pays dividends.
Well, I'm laughing here too because this just happened a few minutes ago. You sent out a tweet earlier detailing, kind of some of the details that have kind of been leaked and reported, and things that Team Europe was paying attention to, the doctor thing, the blah blah blah. And Kevin Kisner, one of the assistant captains, I don't know if you've even seen this yet. Kevin Kisner, one of the assistant captains, replied to your tweet and said something along the lines of, I'll get it word for word to make sure I quote it properly. He said, "Weird, we did all the same things, but don't go advertising." And part of me is just like, want to be like, okay, hey man, I don't want you obsessed with the shampoo in the hotel and blocking out light at the doors if you can't set up the golf course properly. Like, if you can't, this is about Europe being so far along in the process of having all the important things locked down that they are able to pay attention to the small details that might make a fraction of a difference come the blah 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 day. Versus, you're talking about team doctors on the European side that said, you got to get here. We're going to be here in the Eastern time zone 2 weeks. We're going to be here. Nobody's leaving the Eastern time zone during this time. And the U.S. showed up in Rome and complained about jet lag as if the dates of that event weren't set 10 years prior. Like, we knew when this was going to happen. And that's such a wide gap to try to close. And I do think, like, there's going to be times when the U.S. is more talented than Europe and wins the Ryder Cup. I do not think Europe's going to win the next 7 of these, but I think this Ryder Cup could have been won and should have been won by the U.S. on home soil with a proper process. I have so much respect for what Europe does. That is in no way meant to diminish their talent level or their ability. But if you just got to a somewhat, hey, I'm not costing my team through messing up some of these details, their talent should have won out on home soil. Would I have taken this U.S. team on the road at a Dare Manor? If these two teams played at a Dare Manor, like last week, would I have taken the U.S.? I absolutely would not have. I think they really need to change things to be able to win on the road, but there's just no excuse for blowing a home one, man. You've seen up front the details that you're in control of the home course. There's no possible way you'd ever punt on that advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to check in with Kisner and slide in and have a conversation. But one of the things that I've thought about, and I spoke with you and some others last week about, is not necessarily the number and the minutia of what all those decisions are, but sometimes it's just the quality of those decisions. And one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if you picked up on it, was the Americans on Friday walked out with the flag. The pairings like grab or given a flag and walk out with the flag. And from what I could tell, I don't think they knew they were going to be doing that. And so Bryson and JT come out and it's draped over them, and it's a cool patriotic moment as they walk out. And then Scotty and Russell kind of each hold it, and it's not really working. They can't walk together. So Scotty takes it, and then he's holding it. He realizes he's about to sort of drop. He hands it to an assistant captain. And then the next day, they don't do that. And it's changed. And so that's a tiny little thing, but I'm just like, they're about to go and hit the first shot of the Ryder Cup, and that's sprung upon them, and they don't know what they're doing. Whereas, I guarantee that Luke Donald told them exactly how many seconds to wait until you walk out after, or try and walk quickly so the boos kind of overtake the cheers, whatever it is. But it's just, it's 1,000 different decisions, and you can try and make the shampoo smell better or whatever it is, but the quality of each decision and the reason you're doing it is what can pay off. And again, it's just that these are tiny things. Probably 95% of them make no difference. But what Luke Donald wants, and what Keegan probably wants with it all, is that the players can just sort of coast, so they're not having these decision stop points on the way. They're not having a conversation on Friday night saying, I think we maybe teed off on the wrong holes today. What do you think about tomorrow? I felt like I was hitting a lot of long shots in. I thought I was, what? They don't have to, like, the Europeans are just going off to their little ice bath and their little snooze pod in the team room, and they're just resting without having to make decisions. But yeah.
Oh man, what was we haven't really talked much about Sunday. What was Sunday like for you? I'm not gonna lie, it sprung on me way later than it should have that this was a thing, that this was not over. I don't know, did you hear Justin Rose say this quote that you've tweeted out, or where did you get this lie? Tell me about that.
So I started Sunday like everyone did. This is relatively over, and all the conversations about where's the winning point going to go. Oh, they put Rory out 4. They think they're going to get the 2.5 points there, and I sort of thought it would be sort of 6-6. I just assumed it would sort of level itself out and be even. So I'll take you through my process. Was I thought I would follow Justin Rose for most of the back 9. Hopefully he gets his win, and he rides off potentially in his last Ryder Cup 5-0. He's going to get a phone call in 2 months asking him to be captain, whether he wants to accept it. Maybe winning 3. Undefeated. Sorry, yeah. He would finish undefeated, and he would get this phone call, and he probably doesn't take it because he thinks he's playing too well. But regardless, it could be his last Ryder Cup. He put so much into trying to be ready. And so, long story short, I notice he's down, and I think I'll take in a couple of other matches. Then I'm like, nah, this is my angle. I'm going to go and follow. So I walk up the last 6 or 7 holes with him. Obviously, the first group that comes in, they both have the putt. I've got my phone out ready to record you, so I've got a little memory of Rose last putt, and he's going to point at me. This time it's going to be me. He's going to,
you, Jamie, you.
It was you, 2018. But he misses, and Cam makes it, and suddenly there you could feel a tiny shift. They're like, this hasn't really happened this week, where they spun it at the end, or the back 9 didn't go their way. We didn't see a whole lot of change on back 9s. And so, Rose comes over, and funnily enough, he was standing next to Francesco Molinari and Luke Donald. The 3 of them stood right in front of me looking over a green, and I nudged somebody I knew from the Team Europe and said, which one of those do you think is going to be captain in 27? But at that point, Rose looked at the leaderboard, huge big leaderboard at the first, saw at one point there was 6 blue, now there's only 1. And it was an American backroom. It was one of the caddies from the American team that is driving a buggy. He just went over and nudged him and just looked him in the eye and went, squeaky bum time. And this was after 1 match. So you think, oh, surely. And he was saying it probably a tiny bit. I don't think he fully believed it at that point. But then I hovered on 18 and watched another group come through, and Bryson holds a putt. And then I watched another group come through, and JT holds a putt. And all of a sudden, you're just kind of running out of, and then there wasn't going to be somebody coming to 18 for a while, and you sort of look back and go, oh, well, if all those halves work out, you'll laugh. I was like, my therapist on Sunday was the data golf probability. So I was like, oh, we're still 78%. I need to calm the F down. Like, what the hell? And then you just look around, and it was just 1 by 1, you're running out of bullets. Like, oh, that's not going great. Shane Lowry's 2 down with 4 to play. Tyrrell's just gone one down. Bob's like struggling. Bob's 4-putting. And so, yeah, it got beyond real with probably the last hour that everyone would have watched. And you could completely sense it. One of the interesting things to watch at Ryder Cup is where the assistant captains are, because you've got 12 matches. You only have maybe a captain and 4 assistants. So quite often you see, they're with somebody in their pod, or they're with the guy that's maybe needing the help. And they were sort of like darting around. I don't know which way to go. I don't know. I think to beginning of the day, they're probably, where am I going to go and spray champagne on the green? Like, am I going to be on 16? Then it suddenly became, I need to make sure that Shane's like in a good frame of mind to get this over the line. But even when Shane was over that putt, I was just not in a comfortable point of view. I'm glad I'm not a Whoop subscriber, so I couldn't look back and see that I was having a cardiac arrest for the last hour. But
it having been on that side of it, of the long odds, it can't possibly flip. And then when it gets late and you just realize how much things are going to change with one putt, like Shane's putt was massive, man. I know there were points that settled after that, but if that goes in, I'm sorry, Hatton, Morikawa, and maybe Morikawa would have choked it worse. I don't know, but like, golf plays out differently if the Ryder Cup is dependent on these incoming shots, really. And Shane you can't tell me it didn't affect Russell Henley, who played an unbelievable match, and he left 2 putts. He would just never leave either of those 2 putts short in a PGA Tour event ever. Neither one, 17 and 18. And he's caught some flack for it, but man, you look at it, he and Shane played the best golf of anyone on the golf course that day. He got a tough draw and it didn't finish great for him, but man, that was an intense Sunday. And honestly, it took until seeing some of the European players next to 17 green a little later in that day, the looks on their faces, before I was like, oh, this is actually real. Like it flipped in like a 30-minute span for me. Of like, dude, there's no possible. Are they going to get to 20? They can get to 20 still. And then, oh man, that was intense. What do you do about the envelope rule? It was, I kind of felt Keegan at no point questioned Victor's injury. I never heard anybody on the U.S. side questioning Victor's injury. Some fans are going to do that, but that's natural. Keegan said, look, he didn't make that as an excuse in the press conference, but he said he thinks the rule should change for the next one. Luke was asked about it almost in a like, hey, Keegan said the rule needs to change. And he came to the defense like, hey, it's benefited the U.S. before. The question really wasn't framed, didn't set up very well for the context. All that to say, like, I'm racking my brain on what to do here. Full point, if your guy needs to sit out, seems harsh. But in this spot, when you only needed 2.5 points, a half point was guaranteeing a half point was critical. And it was a unique situation. And I didn't think anything of it when it happened because it didn't look like it was going to be close, but it was almost close. But I don't have a great answer for what should happen. Do you have any thought on the envelope rule?
I don't have a great answer on it, but I will say Luke Donald's answer was like tremendous. I don't think people know who he is until he answers questions like that. What do you think about Keegan saying the envelope rule should change? He knew years, scores, players, what they injured. He knew everything. So
yeah, revisionist history on some of it. Somebody that did a deep dive into the 91 Ryder Cup. Revisionist history on how Europe handled that envelope rule in 91.
No, I remember there was. Yeah, I wrote in a thread like Monty was calling it. I think we'll get off course with that, but Steve Pate got injured before the Ryder Cup, played a match, and then pulled out for singles. So it seemed like, oh wait, you're able to play. You went down 17 against Langer and Monty, and now you can't play tomorrow. Whereas Hovland's injury came on the night of, or during that round with Bob or whatever it was. I'll say this, that it almost feels like it just doesn't need to be an issue. I know Joel, who we both know at Digest, suggested that you bring a replacement, and then I was like, you can't pick a top name and say you're not playing, but you might be there. Part of me thinks it's even. I would probably make it where it just nobody gets the point for that, so it still evens odds. But it's just weird that Harris English gets a half point, and he's at one point he's got more points than Scotty Scheffler, kind of thing. But it's a weird situation to be in. I will say, and I think you'll have seen it last week, and I don't think fans get a real sort of appreciation for it on TV because you're just cutting to the shots. But when these guys finish on Sunday, they're so drained. It's like you wouldn't believe. Like, they walk off and their whole body language, their existence is just, they're exhausted. And yeah, it's 5 rounds in 3 days for some of them, but it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of prep. It's not a lot of sleep. It's not a lot of rest. And yeah, I find it interesting, the Ryder Cup setup, that you allow it to get to a point where it's just this like kind of, I don't know how you find it, but the vibe on Sunday is often quite funny because the players are on their own and they're tired. So the emotions are kind of not really there to begin with. Obviously, they ramp up late, but kind of feels like some of these guys, and they even admit it, they're playing on a bit of fumes there on Sunday. But yeah, the envelope rule, I don't think it will change. I think it's just one of those things, like not a lot changes at the Ryder Cup. I always think they should do the President's Cup pairings where, you know, you can go back and forth, and like surely that brings in more interest, analysis, backroom team, everything. But I've asked about that before, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So I think get ready to see the envelopes in Adair.
Here's this. If you, my only suggestion to it, if you are the defending champ and you have the player that gets injured, you don't get to retain with a tie. That was my only thing of like, all right,
you got to win outright.
You could win outright. Yeah. Even if Europe had just got to 14.5, I'd been like, all right, this didn't matter. And obviously it didn't end up mattering, but if it had ended 14-14 through the envelope and you had to retain, that would have, they would have, I almost feel like as Europe, you wouldn't even be able to celebrate the right way. Like, you wouldn't have felt like you won it. Right. And I still think we haven't had a tie in a while. And I think there's still something to looking into. Like, do we want one of these things to end in a tie and ended retained? Like, I don't know. That still seems like one we should maybe get ahead of at some point. To your point, not a lot changes in this event, and it's probably unlikely to, but it still just won't ever feel right, I don't think. But anyways, yeah, I think there's something you could, again, this is unrealistic, but like if you win at home and then go tie on the road, I think maybe you should keep it. But like if you tie at home, I don't think there should be any, maybe that's a way to mitigate home field advantage. The tie goes to the home team. How about that instead of retaining?
Yeah, the retaining thing, and even I was asking some of the broadcasters and guys from Sky Sports and stuff, which part are you making a big deal of this Sunday? Is it going to be the retain part, or is it going to be the win part? And they were saying usually they come separate, so we'll make a big deal of them returning, and then we'll make a big deal. I just thought that shouldn't have to be the case. But I've got an ex-colleague of mine over here who's messaging me saying, you know, giving me the envelope asterisks win chat, and I just went back with the motto of if you abstain, you retain. So that was my my motto for the week for Victor. But I felt for him. I thought somebody might ask him the question in the presser, because he looked like he would. I don't know if anyone picked up on Donald saying that he got emotional having to make that Hovland got emotional when making the decision with Luke on Sunday morning, and he was getting a bit emotional then again. But he's a smiley guy, so I can see why you do the Zapruder film of him lifting the trophy and saying, "Oh, his shoulder looks fine."
No, I'll throw that out.
You know what it's like with golf, especially his golf swing and the way he plays. And
you can lift a golf trophy and not be able to swing the golf club needed to, you know, to the top level of your ability. I don't question the injury. It was always going to be hard for American fans to see him fist pump the way he did on 17 in his last match and then have him be injured. Like, that's a tough thing to marry, but I don't think there's any shenanigans, especially when you're up that big too. Like, you'd rather be out. You're not thinking it's going to come down to that. There's no shenanigans in like making sure you get the half point there. But anyways, one thing I did laugh at and notice, and I wish it would have gone the other way here, was when Shane made the putt, all the European players that were behind 18 green refused to run out on the green in any capacity. Like they like were not going to run out there. And I think they should have. Like it was over at that point, right? And there was no Brookline situation there, and like Shane was like running around waiting for somebody to celebrate with him. And they ran out, you know, when Keimer made it in 2012, which guaranteed the retain. Yeah, and they didn't this time, and I feel like we were robbed of that. They should have ran out on the green. As an American fan, I would have celebrated that.
there's a mutual friend of ours that's in Team Europe, and if I'll send you the clip afterwards. But if you watch, he's standing in front of the team, and when Shane's jumping all over, he's like the William Wallace in Braveheart, just holding everyone back. Hold. But yeah, just let Shane do it on his own. But I was thinking the same thing. I thought, to your point earlier, would you have been satisfied with the retain? Personally, not really. Like, it would have felt like, oh, the US will still get the headlines here. So I wanted somebody to come. I wanted Tyrrell to come birdie. I was obviously pulling for Bob to try and get it, but that to me felt like, right, we still need to, like, Shane's like put the nightmare situation out, but we still want the good celebration. So I was a little bit like, is anyone running out on the green? And don't run on, like, everyone's hitting it to the same spot, and it was right in that corner where everyone's standing. But yeah, funny that they didn't.
Put you on the spot with this. Who do you think the captains are on both sides for Ireland 2027?
So I think Tiger will pick it up. I think the idea of an away Ryder Cup for him, with his psyche, with his going into enemy territory and trying to win it overseas, his relationship with JP and what he's played in the Pro-Am for so many years, and kind of coming in as a bit of a savior, could do it. The European one's tricky because I think Justin Rose should probably be captain. But as I just said to you, and I said to people, I don't think people quite understand it. It is 2 years away, but he will have to be asked about it this year. And he's just finished runner-up at the Masters. He's
almost
nearly
won the
Masters.
The Keegan thing is not any indication too. Like, you can't do both, man. Like, you can't do both. I'm sorry.
And he was asked about it at Wentworth, what do you think about being captain? And he gave a lot of praise to Luke, and he said it's a funny one with captaincy. You either get asked too early or you get asked too late. You get asked too early and you think you can still play, or you get asked too late and you've relaxed into your post-golf life, and then you're suddenly then taking up a full-time job again. And you see the way that Donald's done it. So I think Rose will get a call, but I don't think he'll take it. Donald certainly didn't shut it down. He said he's going to enjoy tonight and think about it. And when you go elsewhere, the only other two candidates that I've heard people talk about is, Francesco. If it's just a case of, the team's there and he doesn't have maybe the charisma and the sort of charm of everyone else, but he's done it. He sort of paid his way to it. And then I've heard other people saying maybe it's another one for Podrig. He got a kind of an odd one to do, being COVID, being Whistling Straits, and just the end of that sort of era of that team. And could he come, and Tiger versus Podrig would be interesting. But I think if you were asking me, it would probably be Tiger versus a non-Donald. I don't know. Like, Luke Donald's going to get a knighthood. We'll be referencing him as Sir Luke Donald in 5
won 3 in a row. No captain from Europe has ever won 3 in a row. He could be the first to do that.
Yeah, but I just don't know that it's additive to the legacy. I think that's just that's a Jamie Kennedy stat on Twitter. That's not something that people necessarily really care about. So I just don't know. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I'd be surprised if it wasn't Eldrick on the other side.
I'd be curious what the U.S. is going to do. My understanding from what I'd heard was they had decided prior to this week they were planning on, I believe it to be Brandt Snedeker to be the next one. I don't know if this disaster causes them to change plans and change course. I think it was a big enough disaster to warrant that. Granted, I have no idea what Snedeker would be like as a leader. I also am not convinced like just bringing Tiger in is the answer and that paper's over anything. But that's a conversation for a different day. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to get to that. But Jamie, always appreciate your contributions to the Ryder Cup discourse. Congratulations. Well deserved. Hope you've enjoyed the celebration. Thanks for spending some time with us as well. And best of luck to you.
Thank you very much. It was good to see you out there last week, and we're on to Adair.